you have come to a threshold that few ever reach consciously. A doorway that does not exist in the material world, though it shapes the material world entirely. I sense it. As one senses weather shifting behind the skin, there is something in you, an ancient pulse, a memory older than language, preparing to move. The empath is about to break a pattern that has wrapped around their life like a vine around an old tree, tightening year after year, shaping growth, restricting movement, influencing love, and deciding identity. The empath, perhaps without noticing, has lived under an inheritance of feeling, of taking responsibility for emotions that were never theirs to carry, of healing wounds that other people refused to face. And yet, the moment always comes when the unconscious stirs, like a serpent beneath the floorboards of the psyche, and whispers, "This is not your destiny. This burden was never meant to be your lifelong shape. A soul like yours was not crafted merely to absorb, but to transform, to create, to reveal the unseen structure of human suffering and redemption." Sit with this realization for a moment. Feel the room around you soften. Feel time stretch wider. I am not here to teach the ego, the surface mind that chases approval and survival and habit. I am speaking to the self, the deep interior, the one that dreams beyond your name, the one that walks through lifetimes. For the empath, the world has been noise, and to cope with noise, one learns silence. Silence becomes identity. One becomes what others need. One learns to anticipate, to soothe, to carry storms that do not belong to them. This is how patterns are forged, not in decision, but in necessity, and yet every psychic pattern contains within it a seed of reversal. The same force that entrapped you becomes, when understood, the very key that frees you. Imagine an old dream. In it, you are walking through a house you have known since childhood. The rooms are familiar, but the doors are locked. The windows show landscapes you have never traveled. You search each hallway with a quiet sadness, knowing something is missing, though you cannot name it. Suddenly, in the corner of a forgotten room, dust dancing like spirits, in the slanted light, you see a door half buried behind a dresser. It was always there, unnoticed, unentered. When you reach for the handle, your hand trembles, you hesitate, not because you fear the dark beyond the door, but because you sense that opening it will end the life you have always known. That door is the unconscious pattern, the invisible law that has guided your relationships, your reactions, your tendency to give too much, feel too deeply, break quietly. Most people live their entire lives without ever touching that door. But something in you is changing. You have begun to dream differently, breathe differently. Notice the subtle weight of memories you used to carry without question. And if you continue, that door will not simply reveal truth, it will dissolve illusion. To break a pattern, one must learn to see it. To see it One must step outside the self that has been shaped by it. The empath's awakening is not rebellion, it is remembrance. You are remembering who you were before the pattern claimed your identity. Notice how your heart reacts to these words. There may be grief, the kind that burns as it frees. The empath's deepest sorrow is not what was done to them, but what they did to themselves in order to survive. You dimmed your light so others could feel comfortable. You tolerated chaos because you hoped love would emerge from it. You walked into other people's wounds like a physician into a battlefield, believing that if you could heal them, maybe they would stay. Maybe they would see you. Maybe they would love you. But the unconscious does not deceive, it preserves. And so your psyche built patterns of self-abandonment, patterns of rescuing, patterns of being chosen last because you chose others first. These patterns were the architecture of your younger self's safety, yet now they are the architecture of your limitation. The empath is about to break the pattern that held them back for years, and not through anger or rejection, but through revelation. You are not who the past trained you to be. The self is larger than the wound. The soul remembers freedoms the ego has forgotten. There's a moment before transformation where everything becomes painfully clear, the relationships that drained you, the roles you played unconsciously, the years spent softening your voice because the room was filled with louder wounds. Awakening is not gentle, it is volcanic. The mountain does not apologize when it erupts, it simply reveals the fire that has been building beneath its surface for centuries. I want you to imagine the pattern itself as a living archetype within you. It stands like a figure robed in shadow, neither enemy nor ally, but teacher. It approaches like an old guardian and whispers not in threats, but in memories. Remember when you stayed in the room, even though your body screamed to leave. Remember when you spoke softly, so others would not feel threatened by your truth. Remember when you absorbed someone's storm, so they didn't have to face the sky they created. This archetype does not shame you. It reminds you, because awareness is the doorway through which transformation enters. There is a particular dream many empaths share. In it, they stand in a river, water rising, cold against the skin. They look behind and see faces they have loved some kind. Some cruel, some broken. Each calls their name, not to greet, but to hold. The empath feels torn, wanting to reach for them, but also sensing the river's current pulling forward. The water symbolizes life, movement, destiny. To remain is drowning, to move forward is liberation. And yet the empath hesitates, because breaking the pattern means leaving behind the identity that pain constructed. You have been the healer, the listener, the absorber of storms. Who are you without that role? The unconscious asks, not as challenge, but as invitation. To break a pattern is to walk forward, even if those behind you call your name with urgency or guilt or affection. The empath does not rise by saving others, they rise by saving themselves. And in doing so, they become a mirror through which others finally see their own shadow. When you stop playing the role you were conditioned to play, the entire story shifts. Patterns break, not through force, but through refusal. You no longer react the way you once did. You no longer betray your intuition for connection. You no longer bleed so another may breathe. When this shift begins, the world around you trembles. The narcissist loses control. The family system becomes confused. Old friends accuse you of changing. They do not realize you are not becoming different. You are returning to yourself. The empath breaking an old pattern is not a small event. It is the psyche cracking open. It is the unconscious speaking out loud after being silent for decades. It is the shadow stepping into light, not as threat, but as truth. The shadow of the empath is not darkness. It is the power they once suppressed to remain lovable in a world that feared emotional depth. When that shadow steps forward, the pattern dissolves. You begin to say no, not with anger, but with understanding. You begin to see manipulation not as confusion, but as clarity. You begin to feel your energy not as responsibility, but as inheritance. This is the turning of tide. Pause, breathe, feel the interior movement. Something is awakening beneath your ribs, slow like dawn, powerful like wildfire, ancient like memory. You do not need to force this change. It is already happening. You are simply becoming conscious of it. The empath has lived as the caretaker, but the archetype evolving within you is the sovereign. The sovereign empath is not moved by guilt. The sovereign empath chooses connection, but does not collapse into it. The sovereign empath gives love, but does not sacrifice self. When this archetype rises, the pattern that held you back begins to fracture. And in that fracture, light pours through. You may feel it even now, a trembling recognition that life cannot continue as it has. The river is moving, the door is waiting. In the dream, water rises to your waist now. The faces behind you grow smaller. You lift one foot, then the other. The current carries you forward. You are not running, you are returning. The moment the unconscious becomes conscious, destiny changes shape. The empath who breaks their old pattern does not merely heal, they transform generational architecture. They rewrite ancestral contracts. They interrupt centuries of emotional inheritance. A single empath waking up is not personal, it is cosmic. You are that moment. You are that breaking. You are that awakening in motion. The river is not simply a metaphor. It is the psychic bloodstream of your life. Everything you have ever felt flows through it. Every unspoken word, every suppressed intuition, every childhood ache that never found resolution, all of it has moved within you like water, waiting for recognition. When the empath begins to break free from their long-standing pattern, it is not merely a choice, but a current of inevitability. The psyche reaches a point where silence no longer protects, where softness no longer sustains, where understanding without boundaries becomes a form of self-betrayal. And then something in the soul declares enough. It is not anger. It is not revenge. It is awakening. I have often said that the greatest burden of the empath is not that they feel too much, but that they were taught to feel for others instead of themselves. The world rewarded them for it. The wounded loved them for it. The broken depended on them for it. And so the empath became a vessel of other people's storms, carrying tempests that never belonged inside their chest. You learned to hold lightning without fear. You learned to smile while drowning. You carved peace out of chaos and called it love. This is how patterns take root, not through weakness, but through devotion. But devotion without self-awareness becomes bondage. There is a dream that visits the empath at the beginning of their transformation. They find themselves inside a vast cathedral with high stone ceilings. Air thick with candle wax and ancient echoes. The pews are empty, yet the room is alive with presence, a sense of something unseen watching. Waiting, they walk toward the altar, footsteps reverberating through the silence. And there on the marble floor lies a mirror. When they look down, they do not see their familiar face. Instead, they see the many versions of themselves layered like ghostly reflections. The child who learned to be quiet, the teenager who felt too deeply, the adult who carried others without question. Each reflection watches with a solemn, aching tenderness. And then, slowly, the images begin to merge until there is only one face remaining. The face is not soft, it is luminous with truth. It does not beg to be understood. It does not bend to be loved. It simply is. This is the moment the pattern begins to break, when the empath sees themselves without distortion. The spell of self-sacrifice dissolves. The need to be chosen evaporates. They no longer seek permission to breathe. They realize that love is not proven through suffering, and connection is not maintained through self-abandonment. To break a pattern is to reclaim perception. The unconscious becomes conscious. The mirror shows the self. At last, do you feel it? Something inside you stirs as though a curtain has been lifted from your inner world. For years, your mind believed you were weak when you were simply carrying the weight of others. You believed you were sensitive when you were, in truth, exquisitely aware. You believed you were too much, all while living less than your full self. The empath's shame has always been misinterpreted power. What the world called fragility was the soul's ability to taste emotion in its purest form. What others named overthinking was intuition, speaking in layered tongues. What you mistook for loneliness was separation necessary for consciousness to bloom. But power, like shadow, must be integrated, or else it becomes a pattern that devours the one who holds it. Breaking the pattern is not only about letting go, it is about stepping into power, into identity, into ownership of energy. The empath who awakens becomes a force the world no longer knows how to predict. The very traits once exploited now become shields, boundaries, discernment. Compassion evolves into clarity. Giving evolves into sovereignty. Intuition evolves into command. You will notice the shift first in your body. The nervous system, once stretched thin like thread across an endless horizon of emotional noise, begins to thicken into rope, your breathing deepens. You pause before reacting. You stand inside your own presence rather than lose yourself inside someone else's story. The body remembers its original blueprint, not to absorb, but to channel. You stop internalizing what is not yours. You stop confusing empathy with duty. This is the breaking. Others will feel it before you speak it. Some will shrink away not because you are unkind, but because you no longer serve their unconscious need for power. Some will grow louder because your boundaries activate their unresolved wounds. Some will disappear because they were attached not to you, but to the version of you that existed before you woke up. When an empath breaks a generational pattern, the social structure around them trembles. Relationships shift like plates beneath the earth. Nothing remains unchanged. But understand this, those who can meet your new depth will rise to meet it. Those capable of genuine connection will not fear your sovereignty. True love does not require you to shrink. True friendship does not demand your silence. True intimacy does not feed on your self-erasure. The pattern breaks not by pushing people away, but by refusing to lose yourself inside them. When you choose yourself, the world rearranges. There is a symbol in alchemy known as the Ouroboros, the serpent that devours its own tail. It represents cycles, endings becoming beginnings, transformation born from self-consumption. The empath who lived in repetition, loving too much, giving too far, burning too quietly, becomes the serpent. The moment they confront the pattern, they devour the old self, not with violence but with integration. They do not destroy who they were, they absorb it. The child who surrendered their voice becomes the adult who speaks with discernment. The caretaker becomes the sovereign. The healer becomes the witness of their own healing. A new archetype emerges, the empath with fire. Not fire that burns selflessly to keep others warm, but fire that illuminates their own path first. This flame does not consume, it reveals, it walks through shadow without apology. It speaks truth without tremor. It feels deeply without drowning. It holds love without losing shape. This archetype is dangerous to the old pattern because it cannot be manipulated by guilt, flattery, or chaos. It is no longer fueled by trauma, it is fueled by consciousness. And consciousness is the one thing the unconscious pattern fears. There is another dream, one that marks the turning point. The empath stands at a cliff's edge, overlooking a valley lit by moonlight. Below, shadows move like old memories, familiar but distant. A wind rises, carrying whispers, voices of past versions of self, of people they once loved, of wounds they once carried. The voices plead, stay. You know this place. You know this suffering. Safety lies in repetition, but the empath's heart beats differently now, slow, powerful, sovereign. They step closer to the edge. In the distance, a new horizon shimmers, unknown yet magnetic. To leap is to trust is to transform. Breaking a pattern is always a leap. You cannot plan awakening. You cannot schedule liberation. The psyche moves like thunder, sudden, inevitable, uncompromising. You have already taken the first step by noticing the cycle. Awareness is the blade that cuts old roots. Reflection is the fire that purifies old soil. What remains after the burning is truth, and truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. You will not return to who you were. The empath before awakening was a seed. The empath after awakening is a forest. This transformation is not the end, it is the beginning. You have broken only the first layer of pattern. Beneath it lies deeper memory, deeper ancestry, deeper identity. The unconscious does not unfold all at once. It reveals itself through rhythm, like breath, like tide. You are stepping into a long initiation. The river will carry you further. The door will open wider. The self will continue to call you forward. You are not just breaking a pattern, you are rewriting the psyche's architecture. You are not just healing, you are evolving. You are not just rising, you are remembering. There is a moment in every spiritual transformation where the psyche trembles, not from fear, but from recognition, as if the soul stands before an inner dawn, watching shadows stretch long and thin across the ground as light begins to rise behind them. You, the empath, are standing in this moment. You are no longer inside the memory of who you once were, nor fully inside the horizon of who you are becoming. You are between, and the threshold between is the most sacred territory a human being can ever walk. This is the initiation into selfhood. I want you to feel the gravity of that sentence, not intellectually, not conceptually, but cellularly, as if it were spoken from the marrow of your own ancestral bones. You are stepping into the dimension of self, the part of identity that is older than your name, older than your wounds, older even than the family story you were born into. Before the world told you who to be, you knew. Before pain narrowed you, you were vast. And now the pattern is breaking. The walls are loosening. The archetype is shifting. You are remembering your original expanse. But awakening is not gentle. The soul expands in tremors. All defenses collapse like architecture built for storms long gone. There may be tears, not of grief, but of release. There may be silence, not of suppression, but of rebirth. You may feel loneliness, not as abandonment, but as spaciousness. The empath must experience emptiness before they can experience authenticity. You cannot know the shape of your own voice until you stop echoing the voices of others. You cannot feel your own soul until you stop inhabiting the pain of the world. Breaking the pattern means stepping out of the roles you never chose but performed flawlessly. You no longer carry the unconscious burden of healer, rescuer, absorber. You begin to sense a different energy rising inside you, heavier, steadier, older, like standing in the presence of a mountain. This is the self, not the personality shaped by childhood adaptation, but the original psychic blueprint, the eternal inner figure that existed before wounding, before memory, before form. The empath's destiny is not to lose themselves in others. The empath's destiny is to understand others without dissolving into them, to feel deeply without becoming captive to the feeling, to walk into darkness without forgetting their own light, to love with strength rather than surrender. This shift is tectonic. It reshapes identity from the inside outward. The world will sense it. You will sense it before anyone else. Sometimes it appears first as restlessness, a subtle rejection of patterns that once felt natural. You may wake one morning with a strange realization that a friendship you sustained with effort now feels hollow. You may speak a truth you once bit back. You may find yourself withdrawing from conversations that drain your nervous system. These are not small ripples, they are psychic earthquakes. A pattern cracks every time you choose yourself. And with each crack, the old archetype disintegrates. You may feel guilt at first. Old conditioning whispers like an ancestor in the blood, reminding you of who you were trained to be. Be kind, be accommodating, be understanding. Do not disappoint. Do not disrupt. Do not outgrow your cage. But growth itself is disruption, and the empath no longer fits inside their old emotional costume. You are shedding skin, identity, memory. You are shedding the version of yourself the world loved because you bled beautifully. But the self does not bleed, it burns. Fire, in Jungian symbolism, represents transformation, not destruction for its own sake. But the alchemical turning of raw material into purified essence. You are walking through fire now, but notice it does not hurt. It illuminates, it warms, it reveals. The flames are not here to consume you, they are here to show you what you no longer need to carry. The empath breaking their pattern is like a phoenix not rising from ashes, but from history. You do not leave ruin behind you. You leave ghosts, ghosts of versions you no longer serve, ghosts of expectations that no longer bind you. As you rise, you meet a silence that once terrified you, but now feels like freedom. Silence becomes spacious. Spaciousness becomes clarity. Clarity becomes power. One night, perhaps soon, you will dream again. You will find yourself in a forest at dusk, the air thick with scent of pine and wet soil. Fireflies drift like silent thoughts. The trees are tall, ancient, guardians of everything you have forgotten. You walk deeper, feeling neither lost nor afraid. Your footsteps do not echo, they are absorbed into moss, into earth, into memory. Then, in the clearing, you see a figure sitting by a fire. When you approach, you realize the figure is you not as you appear in the waking world, but as you exist in the mythic realm of soul, stronger, older, wilder, a gaze like winter sky, clear and unblinking. This version of you says nothing. They simply hold out their hand. In the palm rests a single key, old and blackened by time. You know instinctively that it unlocks the final room of your psyche, the room where your power has been kept. The empath breaking a pattern eventually reaches this inner meeting, the encounter between the adapted self and the original self. To accept the key is to accept the responsibility of your power. Many fear it. Many turn back. Because once you open that final door, you can never again pretend to be powerless. You can never again collapse into the old identity of healer, martyr, savior. You can no longer blame others for keeping you small. The self demands ownership, and ownership is the birthplace of sovereignty. This is why breaking the pattern takes time. The psyche does not rush evolution. It unfolds in spiral motion, returning you repeatedly to old lessons with new eyes. Each time you revisit a wound, you see it from a higher vantage, and then one day the wound no longer hurts, it instructs. The memory no longer bleeds, it teaches. The past no longer holds, it releases. You begin to love differently, not from lack, but from fullness, not by sacrificing, but by choosing not to be needed, but to be met. The empath no longer seeks partners to heal, they seek equals to grow with. They no longer stay where love must be earned, they go where love is exchanged. You begin to feel your energy as sacred resource rather than open reservoir. You begin to choose where your soul is offered and where it is not. And the world shifts. Those who once dominated you find their power gone. Those who relied on your silence find themselves confronted by their own. Those who fed on your light discover they must generate their own or live in shadow. You are no longer the emotional sponge, you are the mirror. The mirror is the most intimidating symbol in the human psyche. It reveals, it reflects, it returns truth without softening its edges. When the empath becomes the mirror instead of the vessel, the pattern breaks completely. The unconscious wound that shaped your identity releases its final thread. You no longer respond from habit, you respond from awareness. You no longer confuse connection with obligation. You no longer mistake intuition for fear. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable. Your nervous system, once trembling with overfeeling, becomes a cathedral of stillness. You speak less, and your silence carries more weight than your words ever did. You feel more, and yet you overflow less. You love deeper, but you lose yourself never again. The empath breaking their pattern is not soft evolution, it is revelation. It is the psyche stepping into its rightful throne. It is the self returning to claim the temple of the body. The world will know, you will know, the old roles will fall away like autumn leaves, no longer needed by the tree preparing for spring. And spring is coming. You can feel it beneath everything, the quiet widening inside you, the subtle pulse of destiny rearranging itself, the internal season changing like weather across time. The pattern held you for years, but the soul is older than years. The soul remembers its path. You are not walking forward, you are walking home. And home has been waiting. There comes a quiet hour in every transformation where the soul no longer seeks permission from the past. You may not notice it as a dramatic moment. It may feel like nothing more than a breath taken without tension, or the simple realization that peace has replaced longing. That is how evolution disguises itself not as thunder, but as clarity. You wake one morning and understand with startling ease that you are no longer the person who tolerated what once felt unchangeable. You no longer bend where you used to break. You no longer open doors. The unconscious has already closed. This is the final movement of breaking the pattern. It does not arrive with fanfare. It arrives like dawn inevitable. Gradual, softly absolute. There is a phase of awakening I rarely describe because it cannot be understood with the mind. Only lived through the marrow, the ego does not initiate it, the unconscious does. When the pattern dissolves completely, the empath experiences a strange and profound neutrality. Not indifference, not detachment. Neutrality, the emotional floods that once defined your identity become rivers flowing through you rather than into you. You feel everything, but nothing owns you. You sense sorrow, but do not drown in it. You hear anger, but it does not ignite in your bones. You witness manipulation, but it passes through your awareness like smoke dispersing in wind. The empath before awakening is water. The empath after awakening is the ocean. Vast, deep, uncontainable, no longer shaped by the vessel shaping the world by presence alone. To reach this place,